The periscope broke the surface like a metal serpent rising from the depths, and through its narrow lens, I watched the most magnificent and terrifying sight of my naval career. There, cutting through the Pacific swells just 4,000 yards away, was the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy, the aircraft carrier Shokaku, her flight deck bristling with Zero fighters and dive bombers, her massive hull displacing 30,000 tons of steel and death. My hands trembled slightly on the periscope handles as I realized we had just stumbled into the middle of Admiral Ozawa's mobile fleet, the most powerful naval force Japan had left. In 60 seconds, I would either become a hero or send 48 American submariners to the bottom of the Philippine Sea. I am a torpedoman aboard the USS Cavalla Submarine SS-244. And this is the story of how our small crew dealt a devastating blow to the Japanese Empire that would echo through history. It was June 19, 1944, and we were about to change the course of the Pacific War. 3 weeks earlier, our submarine had slipped away from Pearl Harbor under cover of darkness, her hull painted in the dull gray that would help her disappear beneath the waves. The Cavalla was brand new, commissioned just 5 months prior in February 1944. She was a Gato-class submarine, 311 feet of American engineering marvel, powered by 4 diesel engines that could push her at 20 knots on the surface and 9 knots submerged. Our skipper, Commander Herman Kossler, was a seasoned veteran with ice water in his veins and a reputation for aggressive tactics. He'd graduated from the Naval Academy in 1930 and had already proven himself in Pacific combat. As we cleared Pearl Harbor's submarine nets, he addressed the crew over the intercom. "Men, we're heading into the Philippine Sea as part of Operation Forager. Our mission is to patrol the waters east of the Philippines and intercept any Japanese naval forces attempting to interfere with our invasion of Saipan. Intelligence suggests the Japanese are planning something big, possibly their entire combined fleet." I felt a chill run down my spine as I checked the torpedo room for the 100th time. We carried 24 Mark XIV torpedoes, each one packing 643 pounds of Torpex explosive, enough to crack the spine of any warship afloat. Little did we know that in 3 weeks, we would need every one of them. The journey to our patrol station took us across 2,500 miles of Pacific Ocean. During the long transit, we ran submerged during daylight hours and surfaced at night to charge our batteries and take in fresh air. The submarine was cramped, 48 men packed into a steel tube with barely room to breathe. The air was thick with diesel fumes, cigarette smoke, and the smell of unwashed bodies. But we were a tight crew. In the torpedo room, we had Murphy from Boston, a red-headed Irishman who could thread a torpedo tube in complete darkness. There was Rodriguez from Texas, who kept us laughing with his endless supply of jokes, and Johnson from Nebraska, steady as a rock and always there when you needed him. Each man knew his job and trusted the others with his life. By June 15th, we had reached our assigned patrol area, roughly 200 miles east of Saipan. The invasion of the Mariana Islands was already underway, with 127,000 American troops hitting the beaches under Admiral Raymond Spruance's Fifth Fleet. But somewhere out there in the vast Pacific, Admiral Hisaburo Ozawa's mobile fleet was steaming toward us with 9 aircraft carriers, 5 battleships, 11 heavy cruisers, and dozens of destroyers, the largest naval force Japan had assembled since Midway. June 17th passed quietly. We cruised at periscope depth during the day, scanning the empty horizon. The Pacific stretched endlessly in all directions, its deep blue surface broken only by whitecaps and the occasional seabird. But Commander Kossler was restless. He had that hunter's instinct that told him prey was near. "They're out there," he muttered, lowering the periscope after another sweep. "Ozawa wouldn't miss a chance like this. The whole Japanese fleet has to be moving toward Saipan." He was right. Unknown to us, the Japanese mobile fleet had already passed through the Philippine Sea, heading northeast in a massive formation. Admiral Ozawa commanded 473 aircraft from his 9 carriers, including the veteran Shokaku and Zuikaku, survivors of Pearl Harbor, Coral Sea, and countless other battles. His plan was audacious. Use the superior range of his aircraft to strike the American fleet while staying beyond the reach of our shorter-range planes. June 18th brought more of the same, empty seas and growing tension. But that evening, as we surfaced to charge batteries, our radio crackled to life with an urgent message from Admiral Spruance's headquarters. Japanese forces had been detected moving toward the Marianas. All submarines in the area were ordered to maximum alert. I was on watch in the torpedo room when the word came down. All hands, this is the captain. Intelligence reports large Japanese naval forces in our area. We may see action within 24 hours. All departments prepare for combat operations. The submarine suddenly came alive with activity. Torpedoes were checked and double-checked. The sonar operator fine-tuned his equipment. In the engine room, the diesel mechanics ensured our power plants were running perfectly. Every man aboard knew we might soon face the fight of our lives. Dawn on June 19th broke clear and calm, with visibility extending to the horizon. At 0545 hours, we were running submerged at periscope depth when our sonar operator, Seaman First Class Williams, suddenly straightened in his chair. Contact. Multiple contacts, bearing 270, range 12,000 yards in closing. Commander Kossler was at the periscope in seconds. Battle stations torpedo. All ahead 1/3. The klaxon sounded throughout the boat as men scrambled to their combat positions. In the torpedo room, we quickly removed the exercise heads from our forward tubes and loaded them with warshots, live torpedoes armed with contact and magnetic exploders, whispered the captain, his eye pressed to the periscope. It's the whole Japanese fleet. What we had stumbled into was Admiral Ozawa's mobile fleet in full battle formation. Through the periscope, we could see the massive silhouettes of Japanese carriers, battleships, and cruisers stretching across the horizon. The flagship carrier Teiho, brand new and carrying 37 aircraft, steamed in the center of the formation. The veteran carriers Shokaku and Zuikaku flanked her, their decks crowded with aircraft preparing for the great battle that would soon be called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. But we weren't the only American submarine in the area. Just 40 miles to our north, the USS Albacore, commanded by Lieutenant Commander James Blanchard, was tracking the same massive formation. At 0810 hours, Albacore fired a spread of 6 torpedoes at the flagship Teiho. One torpedo found its mark, striking the carrier on the starboard side. The explosion didn't sink the great ship immediately, but it ruptured aviation fuel lines and started flooding compartments with gasoline vapor. For the next 6 hours, Teiho would steam on, her crew fighting desperately to contain the damage. Finally, at 15:30 hours, a spark ignited the accumulated fumes, and Japan's newest carrier disappeared in a massive explosion that killed 1,650 men, including several veteran pilots who could never be replaced. But we knew nothing of Albacore's attack. Our attention was focused on our own target of opportunity, the veteran carrier Shokaku, steaming just 4,000 yards away with a destroyer screen of 4 ships. At 11:20 hours, Commander Kossler made his decision. Firing point procedures, target bearing 285, range 4,000 yards. Set depth 10 feet. Set speed high. Fire 1. The first torpedo whooshed from tube number 1 with a burst of compressed air. In the torpedo room, I felt the submarine shudder slightly as the 21-foot weapon accelerated to 46 knots, its Mark V electric motor driving it silently toward the target. Fire 2, Fire 3, Fire 4, Fire 5, Fire 6. 6 torpedoes were now racing through the water toward Shokaku at 40-second intervals. The total spread covered 200 yards, making it nearly impossible for the massive carrier to avoid all of them. In the conning tower, we could hear the torpedoes' propellers through the hull as they passed overhead. All torpedoes running hot, straight, and normal, reported the sonar operator. Commander Kossler kept his eye glued to the periscope, watching as our deadly spread approached the unsuspecting carrier. The Japanese had no idea death was racing toward them at nearly 50 miles per hour. Time to target, 1 minute 30 seconds, called the fire control officer. The seconds crawled by like hours. In the torpedo room, we stood frozen, listening for the sound that would tell us whether we had succeeded or failed. The Shokaku was a veteran of Pearl Harbor. She had launched aircraft that attacked Battleship Row on December 7, 1941. Her planes had fought at the Coral Sea, where they sank the carrier USS Lexington. She was a symbol of Japanese naval might, and now 48 American submariners were trying to send her to the bottom. Time. We waited. The only sounds were the hum of the air conditioning and the steady ping of the sonar. Then, suddenly, the submarine shook as if struck by a giant hammer. Wham! The first torpedo had found its mark, striking Shokaku on the starboard side near the island superstructure. Through the periscope, Commander Kossler watched a column of smoke and flame erupt from the carrier's flight deck. Wham! Wham! 2 more torpedoes slammed into the carrier's hull, their Torpex warheads tearing massive holes in her side. Aviation fuel and seawater mixed in a deadly cocktail as secondary explosions rocked the ship. 3 hits, shouted Kossler. She's listing to starboard and losing way. In the torpedo room, we could hear the crew cheering throughout the boat. We had just mortally wounded one of Japan's most important aircraft carriers. But our celebration was premature. The real fight was just beginning. The Japanese destroyer screen reacted with lightning speed. Within minutes of our attack, 4 destroyers were racing toward our estimated position, their sonar pinging frantically as they searched for the submarine that had just crippled their carrier. "Take her deep. Emergency dive to 400 feet, ordered Commander Kossler. The diving klaxon sounded as we plunged toward the safety of the depths. At 400 feet, we were near the Cavalla's maximum safe diving depth, but we needed every foot we could get between us and the Japanese depth charges that were sure to come. We didn't have to wait long. The first pattern of depth charges exploded at 11:45 hours, just 25 minutes after our attack. The concussions were terrifying, like being inside a steel drum while someone beat it with sledgehammers. The submarine groaned and creaked as the pressure waves hammered our hull. Boom, 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 boom. 4 depth charges exploded in perfect sequence, each one closer than the last. The lights flickered and went out, leaving us in darkness except for the red battle lanterns. In the torpedo room, we grabbed onto anything solid as the boat pitched and rolled from the explosions. "Damage report," called the captain over the intercom. Throughout the boat, department heads checked their equipment. Miraculously, we had sustained no serious damage. The Gato-class submarines were built tough, designed to withstand exactly this kind of punishment. But the Japanese weren't finished with us. For the next 3 hours, they dropped depth charge pattern after depth charge pattern, trying to crack our hull like an egg. We counted over 60 explosions, some close enough to shake loose paint and equipment. During the worst of it, around 1300 hours, a pattern exploded so close that I was sure we were finished. The boat lurched violently to port, throwing men against bulkheads. Emergency lights shattered, and we could hear the hull plates groaning under the stress. "That was close," whispered Rodriguez, his usual humor gone. "I think they dented our paint job." But Commander Kossler was a master of submarine warfare. He varied our depth and course constantly, never staying in one place long enough for the Japanese to get a good fix on our position. He used the thermal layers in the water to hide our sonar signature, and he played dead when necessary, shutting down all unnecessary equipment to reduce our noise. At 14:20 hours, the depth charging suddenly stopped. We waited in silence, barely breathing, as the Japanese destroyers continued to search overhead. Through the hull, we could hear their screws churning the water as they crisscrossed our area. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the sound of the destroyers faded into the distance. They had given up the hunt and returned to their dying carrier. At 1500 hours, Commander Kossler decided to risk raising the periscope for a quick look. What he saw through the lens was the death of a legend. The Shokaku was still afloat, but barely. The proud carrier that had fought from Pearl Harbor to the Coral Sea was listing heavily to starboard, her flight deck awash with seawater. Smoke poured from multiple fires burning out of control throughout the ship. Her escorting destroyers were alongside, desperately trying to rescue her crew. "She's going down," reported Kossler quietly. "The Shokaku is finished." At 15:10 hours, exactly 3 hours and 50 minutes after our torpedoes struck home, the great carrier rolled over on her starboard side and slipped beneath the waves. She took with her 1,272 officers and men, along with irreplaceable veteran pilots and aircraft technicians who had been the backbone of the Imperial Japanese Navy's carrier aviation. The loss of the Shokaku was more than just the sinking of one ship. It was a symbol of Japan's declining naval power. She had been present at almost every major Pacific battle from Pearl Harbor onwards. Her aircraft had sunk the carrier Lexington at Coral Sea and damaged the Yorktown at Midway. She was a link to Japan's early victories, when their naval aviation seemed invincible. But now she was gone, sent to the bottom by 6 American torpedoes fired from a submarine that was only 5 months old. The psychological impact on the Japanese Navy would be enormous. While we celebrated our victory in the depths of the Philippine Sea, the greatest carrier battle in history was raging overhead. Admiral Ozawa had launched 4 massive airstrikes against Admiral Spruance's Task Force 58, sending 373 aircraft into battle against the most powerful naval aviation force ever assembled. What followed was a slaughter. American fighter pilots, flying the new F-6F Hellcat, tore through the Japanese formations like wolves among sheep. The Japanese pilots, many of them hastily trained replacements for veterans lost in earlier battles, were no match for the experienced Americans flying superior aircraft. By the end of the day, Japan had lost 426 aircraft and 3 aircraft carriers, the Teiho, Shokaku, and Hio. American losses were just 29 aircraft. The Japanese called it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, and it effectively ended Japan's ability to conduct major carrier operations. Our submarine had played a crucial role in this victory. The sinking of the Shokaku eliminated 1/9 of Japan's remaining carrier strength and deprived them of dozens of experienced aircrew who could never be replaced. After sinking the Shokaku, we remained submerged until well after dark, then surfaced to charge our batteries and ventilate the boat. The fresh night air tasted like freedom after spending 8 hours in the depths dodging depth charges. Commander Kossler immediately sent a radio message to Admiral Spruance's headquarters. Cavalla torpedoed large CV-19 June. 3 hits observed. Carrier sank. The response came back within hours. Well done, Cavalla. Continue patrol. But our war was far from over. We had used 6 of our 24 torpedoes, and there were still Japanese ships in the area. For the next week, we continued our patrol, hoping to find more targets. On June 24th, we encountered a Japanese submarine, the I-44, running on the surface. Commander Kossler fired 4 torpedoes, but the enemy submarine spotted our wakes and crash-dived, escaping destruction by mere minutes. 2 days later, we tracked a Japanese cruiser for 6 hours, but she was too well escorted and moving too fast for us to get into attack position. The frustration was enormous. We had the weapons to sink her, but we couldn't get close enough to use them. By early July, we had expended most of our torpedoes and were ordered to return to Pearl Harbor. The journey home took 3 weeks, during which we reflected on what we had accomplished. In one attack lasting less than 4 minutes, we had eliminated one of Japan's most important aircraft carriers and dealt a psychological blow that would resonate throughout the Imperial Navy. The sinking of the Shokaku also had strategic implications beyond the immediate battle. Japan's carrier fleet had been built around a core of veteran ships and experienced aircrew. Each loss was irreplaceable, not just in terms of hardware, but in institutional knowledge and combat experience. The Shokaku had carried some of Japan's most experienced pilots, men who had been flying combat missions since the war began. When she went down, their experience went with her. Japan's pilot training program, already strained to the breaking point, could produce replacement pilots, but they could never replace the years of combat experience that died with the Shokaku. We arrived at Pearl Harbor on July 23, 1944, to a hero's welcome. Word of our success had preceded us, and the submarine base was crowded with well-wishers and reporters. Commander Kossler was awarded the Navy Cross for his aggressive leadership, and the entire crew received commendations. But the war was far from over. After a brief refit and resupply, the Cavalla was back on patrol in August, prowling the waters around the Philippines as American forces prepared for their return to those islands. We conducted 5 more war patrols before Japan surrendered in August 1945. We sank 2 more ships, a cargo vessel and a small tanker, but we never again had the opportunity to attack a major warship like the Shokaku. The submarine war in the Pacific was largely won by boats like the Cavalla and crews like ours. American submarines sank 1,178 Japanese merchant ships totaling 4.9 million tons, effectively strangling Japan's ability to supply its far-flung empire. We also sank 201 Japanese naval vessels, including 8 aircraft carriers. The Japanese Navy that had attacked Pearl Harbor with such devastating effect in 1941 was, by 1945, reduced to a handful of ships huddled in home ports, unable to venture forth due to fuel shortages and the constant threat of submarine attack. The USS Cavalla continued serving the United States Navy long after World War II ended. She was modernized in the 1950s and served throughout the Cold War, finally being decommissioned in 1969. Today, she serves as a museum ship in Galveston, Texas, where visitors can walk through her cramped compartments and imagine what it was like to fight a war from inside a steel tube beneath the waves. But her real legacy lies in what she accomplished on that June day in 1944. The sinking of the Shokaku was more than just a tactical victory. It was a symbolic moment that marked Japan's transition from hunter to hunted in the Pacific War. The Shokaku had been present at Pearl Harbor, where Japan achieved its greatest victory. Her destruction in the Philippine Sea marked the beginning of the end for Japanese naval aviation. After the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, Japan never again mounted a major carrier offensive. Their remaining carriers spent the rest of the war as training vessels or decoys, their aircraft and pilots sacrificed in futile attempts to stem the American advance. As I look back on that day in June 1944, I'm struck by how quickly the tide of war can turn. In 4 minutes, we transformed from hunted to hunter, from a small submarine trying to avoid detection to the instrument of a major Japanese defeat. But victory came at a cost that we measured not just in enemy ships sunk, but in the young men on both sides who never came home. The 1,272 Japanese sailors who went down with the Shokaku were somebody's sons, brothers, and fathers. They were fighting for their country just as we were fighting for ours. War is a terrible thing, but sometimes it is necessary. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and their brutal treatment of conquered populations left America with no choice but to fight. We fought not for conquest or glory, but for the simple right to exist as a free nation in a free world. The men of the Cavalla, all 48 of us, were ordinary Americans who found ourselves in an extraordinary situation. We were farmers from Nebraska, mechanics from Detroit, fishermen from Massachusetts, and cowboys from Texas. We came from every corner of America, united by our determination to defend our homeland and defeat an enemy that had attacked us without warning or provocation. The submarine service attracted a special kind of sailor, men who could function in the claustrophobic confines of a steel tube, who could remain calm under pressure, and who could trust their lives to their shipmates. We were volunteers, every one of us, and we knew the risks. Submarine duty in World War II had the highest casualty rate of any branch of the American military. 52 submarines were lost, taking with them 374 officers and 3,131 enlisted men. But we also had the satisfaction of knowing that we had played a crucial role in victory. American submarines like the Cavalla didn't just sink ships. We severed the lifelines that connected Japan to her conquered territories. We strangled the flow of oil from the Dutch East Indies, the rubber from Malaya, and the rice from Indochina that kept the Japanese war machine running. The sinking of the Shokaku was part of a larger strategic victory that doomed Japan to defeat. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot eliminated Japan's last hope of achieving air superiority in the Pacific. After June 1944, American forces could advance wherever they chose, knowing that Japanese air power was too weak to stop them. The capture of Saipan, which our submarine patrols helped make possible, put American B-29 bombers within range of Japan's home islands. From that moment, the Japanese mainland was under constant threat of air attack, and the Japanese people began to experience the war firsthand. The psychological impact of the Shokaku's loss reverberated throughout the Japanese Navy. She had been a symbol of their early victories, a reminder of their devastating attack on Pearl Harbor, and their seemingly unstoppable advance across the Pacific. Her destruction served notice that those days were over, that American industrial might and fighting skill had turned the tide of war decisively against Japan. For us aboard the Cavalla, the sinking of the Shokaku was the moment that defined our war. We had struck a blow for America, for the men who died at Pearl Harbor, and for all the Allied prisoners suffering in Japanese camps. We had proven that American submariners could take the fight to the enemy and win, even against overwhelming odds. As I reflect on that day, I'm proud of what we accomplished, but I'm also humbled by the cost of victory. War is never glorious, despite what the movies might suggest. It's a deadly serious business conducted by frightened young men who do their duty because they must, not because they want to. The men of the Cavalla did their duty on June 19, 1944. We faced the most powerful naval force Japan could assemble, and we sent one of their greatest ships to the bottom of the Pacific. It was a moment of triumph that helped secure America's victory in the Pacific War, but it was also a moment that reminded us of war's terrible cost in human lives. The USS Cavalla's victory over the Shokaku stands as a testament to American courage, ingenuity, and determination. It reminds us that freedom is never free, that it must be defended by ordinary people willing to do extraordinary things when their country calls. On that June day in 1944, 48 American submariners answered that call, and their answer echoes through history as one of the decisive moments that secured victory in the Pacific War.